All right, guys. Hey, what's going on? Coach Adrian and Coach Giustin, aka G-Force, here at Vigor Ground in Renton. Hey, today we're going to talk about a series that we actually, Justin and I, we had the privilege and the honor of going to Innovative Fitness with our friend Jesse Yule. Dropped a lot of knowledge bombs with us in terms of stability and mobility. We wanted to share with you guys. So, a lot of this credit goes to Jesse. So thank you, Jesse, if you're watching this, for your time and for dropping some knowledge on both of us. We learned a ton. So guys, this is what the thing is when we have clients coming into Vigor Ground, we have folks that are pretty much all over the place when it comes to limitations, mobility issues, stability issues, and we want to make sure that we start them off on the right platform, getting the right baseline to find out what we can do as coaches to assess them the proper way. So G-Force and I, we're going to do a quick assessment and show you guys, what we learned and how to go through the process. And we wrote some things on the board here in terms of, how it's all going to go down with you guys. So for example, stability and mobility, right? So these are two common terms you may have heard about. And there's a lot of misconception when it comes down to what each other means, right? So for example, stability, a lot of folks confuse that with tightness, which is a byproduct of strength. On the other hand, we look at mobility, most folks will confuse that with flexibility, and they're all different terms, right? So somebody comes into our facility and say, for example, they're lacking core strength. How do we know if they lack, core strength, or any kind of stability in their core, which is basically abdominal, like we call the core seatbelt, or mobility, right? There's a simple test that we go through. And I personally like to go with a simple toe touch, right? So for example, say if Justin comes in and I say, hey, Justin, just go ahead and stand there with your feet together and let's go through a toe touch, right? And say Justin is limited in movement. Say he only goes down to about say mid-shin, okay? And then from there, I'm gonna say, okay, Justin, go ahead and stand up for me. And now go and have a seat on the ground and now see if he can touch his toes in a seated position. Now let's assume that he can touch his toes all the way across, right? So now, notice the big difference though. When he was standing up, he would only went so far. He only went like mid-shin, but then he sat down and then he touched his toes. So what does that mean? It means that we have a stability issue, all right? Now let's assume the same thing. Let's just kind of rewind a little bit and we'll have Justin kind of come up and we'll say the same thing. We'll say, okay, Justin, feet together. Let's have you do a toe touch and say, and come up for me just about halfway. Say like he's stuck right here. Right, so he is basically, I would say, 3 to 4 inches away from the ground. And the same thing, I'm going to have him take a seat and then do the same thing. But now say he does the same, he goes to the same distance, right? So he did the same thing. He went the same distance standing and then the same distance seated. Now we have a mobility issue or tightness issue, right? So, but in most cases, we have folks who are actually here showing core instability. So if we go back again to that first scenario, Justin came up, he was limited standing, but when he sat down, he touched his toes, right? So what that means is we want to have that person kind of working from a bilateral standpoint, meaning 2 feet on the ground, and now work more unilateral, right? Which means like single side. When you're working single side progressions, which we're going to show you right now, is the fact that we start to engage the core. Right? Most individuals, they want to start here right off the bat. They want to start with bilateral, either deadlifts, kettlebell squats, or any kind of implement for that reason, right? Barbells, dumbbells, sandbags, you name it, they want to go there. But if our goal is to strengthen the core, which also goes along the backside, right, the core seatbelt, we want to make sure that we're doing an assessment. So for example, like Jesse told us, his facility, they go through what's called the functional movement screen, FMS. And the way they do that is they go through an active straight leg raise test, a deep squat with the dowel over the head, or if the person's experiencing any sort of back pain, right? So with the active straight leg or the deep squat, if they score a 1, so the way the FMS works is 3s are good, 2s are okay, 1 means we have a lot of work to do, okay? So if they score a 1, or if they experience back pain, automatically that's going to trigger that they work unilateral lower body. It also means that there's a core issue going on here if they're scoring as such, right? So now if there's a core issue going on, we need to do an assessment in terms of what is the lumbar spine telling us? Is that person in extension or are they in flexion, right? So when we look at that, we can say we can work on breathing as a mechanism that's going to help us to reset the body, right? So if we look at Giustin and we say, okay, I'm going to assess to see exactly, is he an extension by looking at his lower back? You can kind of see just by looking at him, he's got a nice natural curve here, but he's somewhat extended, right? If he's flexed, I mean, we're going to have more of a rounded position here. So he's going to be more of a flat back, right? So right here, he has a little bit more extension, which means we can actually talk to him and say, hey, do you have any low back pain? You know, and if he does, we can kind of experience that by just basically talking to him, getting the health history, and also, you know, what was the mechanism, looking at his core strength, doing the toe touch and things like that, right? So, but the main thing is breathing is the main thing that we can actually look at. And for example, we're going to have Giustin on the ground, and we're just going to have him breathe. Now, the main thing here we're looking for is this. As he's breathing, I'm just going to have him normally breathe like he does, right? So I'm just going to look at his chest rise and fall. I'm looking to see if he has more what we call apical breath, which means the chest superiorly rises towards his chin. So if he's breathing, if that chest starts to go upward towards his chin, we have some restrictions going on there. That's more what's called sympathetic, fight, flight, or freeze. So his body's going into survival mode, right? We want more apical expansion. We want more lateral breath and also breathe through his belly, right? As Giustin relaxes more and more, his brain is going to trigger his body to relax. Because you guys think about this. Have you ever been in a situation when you're really tense? When you're really tense, do you tend to breathe easier or is it more restrictive, right? When you're restricted, that also limits what? Limits mobility. But the thing is, again, we also talk about stability, which also creates a sensation of tightness, right? But in this case, we're going to look to see how Giustin breathes and also making sure it's going to relax a little bit more to have more relaxation, to have more apical expansion. Breathing alone is important, right? So what I'm going to have Giustin do is I'm going to say, okay, Giustin, I'm going to have you breathe 4 seconds in through the nose, pause for a second, and then exhale through the mouth for 10 seconds. I can have him do that for a number of rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds, 8 rounds, 10 rounds, however it is, right? We can also go into what we call 90-90. Now imagine if there's a wall at his feet, okay? So here's the imaginary wall, right? We can have Giustin do the exact same thing, pressing the heels and the forefoot into the wall, but again, he's going to maintain that breathing posture, and as a coach, I'm just going to see his chest rise and fall, more expansion as we go, right? So, as we go through these movements here, these are some things we're looking at in terms of breathing. So now we're going to look at 90-90, what we just explained to you by having Giustin's feet planted against the wall, breathe as he normally does, okay? We can also go 90-90, and we're going to go with a single leg, left side only. So check this out. We're going to have Giustin take his heels on this box, okay? So as he does this, we're just going to have him basically brace, and now he's going to come up just gently, and then he's going to raise his right foot gently just off the box. Now what's happening here, guys, he's going to have more pressure being pushed down on the heel here. We can have him kind of close in a little bit, but again, we're going to have him kind of close that gap in between the knees, right? So he's going to actually close that in, but again, notice how he's elevated on that right foot. So now we're doing the 90-90 breathing, again, looking for expansion versus apical breath, single leg, left side activation only. So that's another progression we can get into. We can go prone, laying on his belly, right, to see exactly how is he doing that, you know, by having that pressure on his belly and breathe like he normally does. You know, is that going to really impact everything in terms of like the back rising and falling, right? It can be somewhat uncomfortable for people to be here in this position. But again, the main thing is to see exactly, you know, how much expansion are we going to get as opposed to having that superior breath. So that's going to be the prone. We can go quadruped. Now in this one, we're going to go what's called the cat-camel, right? So now we're going to basically have Giustin on 6 points of contact, hands, knees, and toes. Notice his back is nice and flat, but again, we're going to go into that breathing to see exactly what's happening with expansion or more apical breath as he goes superiorly, right? So that's going to be the quadruped, or we can go half kneeling, right? Again, now check this out. Half kneeling is going to trigger, again, unilateral, core stability, and again, firing the glute, making sure the rib cage drops down towards the hip, right? So that way he maintains neutral spine, but again, 4 seconds into the nose, pause for a second, 10 seconds going out through the mouth. Right, good job, G, very good. So that is the breathing protocol that we're going to show you guys as we go through that. But again, if a person is experiencing a core issue, okay, breathing is going to be the essential, whether it's going to be inflection or extension. You kind of follow the breathing protocol as we go from a minimal standpoint to a progressive standpoint, okay? Here we're going to go kind of mimic in terms of some of the breathing things that we actually got for core activation and strengthening is like the 90-90 single leg, left side only, which Giustin did by having his left foot stabilized on the box here. Toe touch breathing is an important thing because, again, we actually showed you guys by trying to differentiate between stability, mobility, tightness, and flexibility, right? Does he have a stability issue or a mobility issue? Cat camel, which he explained, which he just showed you. There's one called an egg roll, right? Now the egg roll is really cool because now we're going to have Giustin basically hug himself, right? And then when he goes to this movement here, he's bracing, and then he's going to basically fall and then come back up. Fall and come back up, right? So it's a lot more challenging than it looks, right? But again, we can go into that movement called the egg roll. Now the other one's called hollow rock, right? So again, guys, these are all core stabilizers, activities, right? So the hollow rock is where you basically are opening up. Gee, remember, so you're there. Expand those legs out for me, right? And then again, you kind of fall, and then you pop up, right there, exactly. And again, guys, this is a tough one to do, right? But again, I mean, he's got some major core stability going on there, and again, working on that breathing technique. And then the last thing we can actually work on here, guys, is this. Imagine, like, see, Jay's going to grab a kettlebell. We're going to go into a rack position. But notice what he did. When he came into that rack position, what did he do with his rib cage? He actually dropped it down. He's got core activation, stability, anterior, posterior side, and now he's going to keep that kettlebell in the rack position. From here, I can have him walk a specific distance, turn around, switch arms, whatever it may be, right? We go for this one for 3 minutes. And talk about a challenge, that's going to do it for you. But again, you're going to have a strong abdominal activation, core stability, having that kettlebell in that rack position, tension. And when a person walks back and forth, I always give that cue out. Align your nose with your belly button so that way you can't sway laterally, right? So you're going to be locked in, walk normal, but again, you stay nice and tall. Open the chest, we call proud chest, but again, do not let that rib cage flare forward, but drop that rib cage down and then walk back and forth until 3 minutes time is completely up, okay? Protocols before training, okay? 3 things you guys can do. Number 1, definitely work on breathing. We just showed you guys those techniques earlier in the beginning of this video, right? So breathe. 4 seconds in through the nose, 10 seconds out through the mouth. Foam rolling, self-myofascial release work. Make sure you guys are working on getting those glutes, hip, glute medius, hamstrings, calves, hip flexors, quads, upper, low back. Very important, right? Get some lats in there. And then we can work on some static stretching. Things, that's going to hit the hamstrings, the quadriceps, upper mid back, chest, and so forth, shoulder mobility. These are all things you actually can work on to basically improve your training experience, okay? Last thing, core strengthening activities we talked about. Unilateral work is important, right? So we want to make sure we have a lot of core engagement because as you also can know, and think about this, if I'm going to be in a stable position, say 2 feet on the ground, I'm going to have a wide base that I can actually use for support. But when I have only 1 foot counterbalancing my stuff, right, whether I'm working with a kettlebell, sandbag, dumbbells, whatever it is, or even just body weight, right, it's going to be a lot more challenging to be in this little split stance position with 80% of the work being on the planted foot in front, right? So that means I'm going to shift all my weight on this one leg, minimal pressure, 20% on this back foot. That's going to really throw me off laterally, which means my core has to engage. So now we're talking about things like split squats. We're talking about rear foot elevated split squats where you have a foot on a bench and you have to have yourself here. You can drop down to a squat, right? And again, any kind of implement if you desire. If not, go with body weight. We're going lunges, right? Lunges are important, right? So lunges, we can go static lunge, level number 1. This is the way that we actually coach our lunges here at Vigor Ground. We go level 1 is a static lunge, bracing the abdominal wall, back is flat, drive through the front heel, back ball of your foot. Level 2, it's a reverse lunge. Whether he wants to go single side or alternating, it's up to Giustin, okay? We can go level 3, it's a forward lunge, right? Now we're going to step, but again, he's going to control that knee from going over the toe. Again, notice how he has his hand on his abdominal wall to make sure his rib cage doesn't flare open. Level 4, it's the most advanced. It's a ballistic. It's really high intensity. It's a plyometric jump, split jumps. That's level 4. Most folks aren't ready for that one yet, right? That's why we have a progression and a regression. But here's what I always say. Just because you cannot do a level 4 split jump does not mean you can't do it. You can't do it yet, right? So I always say, if you're regressing, it's actually a progression to get you to where you want to go. So think about that, all right? The last thing, guys, single leg squats. Now, the cool thing that we actually learned from Jesse was he actually had Giustin have a tennis ball right in front of his foot, right, with a box right behind him, right? So the main thing was on this one, was, again, we were saying about 80% of the movement, or I would say all of the strength is going to be focused on that single leg, but he's going to have that tennis ball on that one foot. So here's the example here, is we're going to have just about 20% of his, but he's not going to crush the ball. But again, we're talking about core stability. Notice how he has to sit back at the box. But again, he's working, I mean, ultra hard to really focus on all the weight on this leg here, right? I mean, we're talking about core stabilization, breathing, back is nice and straight. But again, guys, this is a lot more challenging. And just think about this. This is all body weight. We haven't even used anything in terms of external loads, right? So overall, guys, this is like the protocol that we're going to start to implement. You know, we'll probably, I mean, some of our coaches have already been doing this already. You know, hopefully you learned a little bit in terms of, you know, how to assess yourself, how to give yourself a great training experience. And if you guys have any questions about anything, I mean, feel free to hit us up, check out our website, or email us. We are here for you guys, and we'll catch you guys on the next video. G-Force, AD, Coach Adrian, we're out of here. See you guys.